Greedfall is, for better and for worse, a bargain bucket BioWare game. Only instead of shagging your way across the galaxy on board the Normandy, you're knocking heads and knocking boots in a fantasy take on 17th century empire building. You're Desardet, legate of a nation called the Congregation of Merchants. You explore the newly colonised island of Tir Fredee in search of a cure for the Malachor, a disease that's slowly wiping out your nation. Developer Spiders is a studio you might know for the painfully average The Technomancer, and I'm happy to report that they've experienced some character progression as a team. Greedfall is better, but there are still more problems with the fantasy RPG than there are hats for me to adorn my badass, roguish, lesbian sorcerer's head with. In some ways, Greedfall sticks the landing, and in others, it falls flat. If you don't want to fall flat too, then you should probably like this video and subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun. That would make you right cool.
Gaze a little more to the right. There! Now, hold the pose!
During character creation, you can pick from 3 classes. Each serve as your standard fantasy archetypes of the warrior, rogue, and mage. You can multi-class if you want. I've done so. I picked the rogue class to begin with, but spec'd into being able to use the magic rings, and during combat you can switch between different fighting styles if you're proficient in them. The guns feel like big, explodey weapons of death and pack a meaty punch, and when you swing a melee weapon, regardless of how big or small it is, landing a blow feels impactful and weighty. There's a Fury attack system where the more damage you deal to foes, the more a bar fills up in the top left corner of the screen. The bar's segmented into chunks, and once a chunk is filled, it turns yellow, and you can press Q to perform a furious attack of whatever fighting style you're using. Depending on whether I was using my chunky kukri or my spell-slinging ring, I'd either do a big violent sweep with my blade or flip around all acrobatic-like and yeet an especially spicy magic missile at whoever I was targeting. There's a tactical pause menu too. At any point during combat you can hit the spacebar and the game will freeze, giving you a menu of different actions you can take and different items you can use. If combat feels a little overwhelming and you need some time to plan out your next move, then this option makes it a lot easier. It's nice that you get all of these options, but most of them aren't really necessary. I only used that tactical pause for 2 reasons. One was so that I could get footage of it for this video so you'd know what it looks like. The other is when I accidentally hit the spacebar after continually forgetting that Greedfall doesn't have a jump button. Combat can feel a tad overwhelming sometimes, but never so much that the tactical pause became useful in any way whatsoever. The furious attacks are kinda cool, but they aren't so much more effective than regular attacks to feel all that special. There isn't a big flashy animation like a red glow or something to differentiate them from normal attacks. You just do a flip or telegraph your attack more, and with how quickly your fury bar fills up, using furious attacks doesn't really become a momentous occasion in the same way that, say, Overwatch Ultimates do. Greedfall makes big talk of having to manage your party to suit different kinds of combat encounters too, but I've only ever shuffled companions around to hear the different things that each person has to say, and when taking them on their Greedfall equivalent loyalty missions. Everyone has a different class that can do different things, but the impact of switching up for fighting reasons felt so negligible that I didn't bother at all. One of the coolest things about tabletop RPGs and the dungeons you crawl within them is the various puzzles that you'll have to solve in order to progress. Video game RPGs used to do this a lot too, but these days you won't run into that many, and the ones you do will be quite clearly signposted, like the animal symbol code crackers in Skyrim. What sort of security system keeps the password on a wall right next to where you put in the password? The Draugr are practically begging to be doxed. Greedfall, to its credit, does have some interesting puzzles that actually require some thinking. They aren't around every corner, but they're frequent enough to be of note. There's one, my favourite, where you're trying to pursue an islander who is suspected to be taking part in blood rituals. The door is blocked, and you find yourself standing in a circle of stones, each bearing a symbol and housing a candle. There's this big, mystical tree that gives you a freaky vision. You then recount the vision to your party, and all the details that you identified. You have to use these details of the vision to light the candles of the right stones in the right order in order to clear the path to your objective. This is really quite cool, and even though I messed it up the first time around, I felt incredibly clever when I managed to get it right. There are also segments of Greedfall where you have to investigate an area, and while this largely comprises of you walking about until you find things you can interact with, it makes you feel like a detective, piecing together the mystery that you're uncovering. It's like Sherlock Holmes, but with tricorns and giant stompy tree men. The opening of most of the early 2000s BioWare games, like Mass Effect and Dragon Age Origins, have starting areas that take you about 3 or so hours to get through. They're always incredibly exposition-y, and also a bit limited in what they allow you to do. Greedfall is the same. You begin in the capital of the Congregation of Merchants, the nation you're a part of, and you have to find your brother because he's going to be the new governor of the Congregation city on the island of Teer, and run some errands for the ambassadors of the other 2 main nations, the Bridge Alliance and the Ptolemais. This is a bit like going on that mission on Eden Prime and then wandering about a very gated off section of the Citadel in the first Mass Effect. Things only really pick up in Mass Effect once you're made a Spectre and go on your first proper mission on whichever planet you choose, because that's usually when something big happens to kick it all off. Likewise, things in Greedfall only pick up once you've made it to the island. Despite this initial slog in Mass Effect, I still absolutely adored the game and continue to go back and replay it from time to time. I'm sure there will be some who, once making it past this hurdle, will enjoy Greedfall, but like with Mass Effect, it's bound to turn people off right off the bat, which isn't anyone's but the game's fault.
Come now, let's lend them a hand.
Once I got through the beginning of the game, the whole premise of 3 nations, each mirroring a real-world society at any given point in time, being all colonial on an island populated by tribal natives, and the insinuation that there will be a big statement on said colonialness really compelled me, actually. The Ptolemais are really interesting. They're aesthetically, and in practice, the Greedfall stand-in for the Catholic Church, complete with all the nasty corruption rampant within the Vatican. There's a subplot where you have to help some fleeing scholars who are going to be burned at stake for discovering historical texts that contradicted the doctrine of the church. And when you show up to the city they founded on Teer, an inquisitor is burning one of the creatures that inhabit the island on a pyre, and the guy literally just chokes a native to death in front of you. The native islanders are really cool too. I don't know what real world influences spiders have used to design them, but their culture and aesthetic are really well fleshed out. Any of the quests that involve finding out more about how their society functions and about their spiritual practices are easily the coolest bits. Your companions are equally as fleshed out, and much like the BioWare games, they act as some of the highlights of the storytelling. Each have their own motivations, and they're pretty well written too. They each have a series of loyalty missions that develops and progresses as you get further through the main questline, and it's entirely possible to romance each of them.
He's quite violent when he's in a rage.
You wouldn't dare. I've been appointed by the Elder of the University of...
Quite violent.
Very well. Do as you see necessary, beasts.
And what of your war with Ptolemais?
It has been dragging on.
Everything else is boring, though. It's either bog-standard historical fantasy stuff, or it's so bogged down in cultural stereotypes that it all just feels a bit overdone. The Bridge Alliance have a Middle Eastern vibe going on, and obviously they're alchemists at war with the Ptolemais because the latter tried to forcibly convert them. Stuff like that. That 3-hour slog comparison I made as well, it's only relatively apt. See, in every sense of the phrase, Greedfall really does feel like a bargain bucket BioWare game. In Mass Effect 1, it's a bit of a grind, but you reach a certain point where you're like, oh, this is actually really good. In Greedfall, the first 3 hours make you want to astrally project out of your body and float away to do or see literally anything else, and then you reach the Teer and you're like, oh, this is actually really mediocre. Outside of the main cast, everyone is voiced really well. A lot of voice actors play multiple characters, but they put on different voices for each, so everyone feels different. What does falter a lot outside of the main cast is how characters are written. About 50% of the NPCs have believable dialogue, while the other 50% feel like their lines haven't been written to fit their characters, using far too complex a vocabulary for the kinds of people that they are, in what I imagine is an attempt to give everything an olden-timey feel. There are so many glitches in Greedfall, you guys. One time a mission waypoint ceased to exist, so I had to manually navigate through the world like it was 2004. I had a conversation with a vibrating man for whom it seemed that this was just a normal part of their day, and I even ran into an incorporeal T-posing pheasant who we in the office collectively assumed to be the pheasant god of the Greedfall universe. One of the most interesting glitches that I ran into though was how characters' dialogue lines and subtitles would occasionally forget what gender my character was.
Do you have those potions you promised us?
Yes, here they are.
Hey, did you see that? That other alchemist kept his word.
Most of the time it'd be milady, she and woman, which was correct and made sense. But every now and then I'd get sirred, even by my companions who should know better. Christ, even in video games I can't escape this bullshit. Maybe it's because I'm butch. What an absolute state. It would make for an interesting conversation about misgendering in games though, so maybe stay tuned for that. Who knows?
It is an immense honor for me to be of service to such noble clientele. What might I do for you?
And it's a shame when Greedfall gets little things wrong, because it gets a lot of little things right. Take customization, for many the most important part of any RPG. Roleplayers dress up, right? Greedfall makes a few mistakes in this regard. There isn't a barber or a place where you can change your makeup, which is always a gripe of mine, but you do have a nice selection of clothes and armor pieces to choose from. What Greedfall does do differently though is that it lets you customize these different items of clothing in a few different ways. Some are more customizable than others, and there are a few unique items that don't have any options, but for most you can add different shoulder pieces, bits what hang around your neck, trinkets and pouches for that diagonal belt thing that you get on every chest piece, what armor bits you have on your gloves and boots. Weapons too have some customization options, mostly with what grips, crossguards and pommels your weapons are adorned with. The only thing that's never customizable, and for which I consider an unforgivable crime, is any hat. Why can't I pop a feather in this tricorn, wrap a flower crown around this bandit's hat, hang corks on strings off the rims of this Inquisitor's Cabello Romano? What a waste. But with how much you can do with the other clothes, I'm not too torn up about it. Greedfall is better than the Technomancer, but being better than the Technomancer isn't exactly the hardest thing in the world. Being better than the BioWare classics, on the other hand, isn't what Greedfall achieves, despite its attempts to be. It's a step in the right direction for spiders, but they still have a lot of work to do. The original Mass Effect was janky and clunky, but I still found myself losing hours and hours to it on a daily basis. With Greedfall, if I wasn't reviewing it, I would have stopped playing about 10 hours into the game. And after this, I probably won't be opening it up again. What did you think of this Greedfall review? If you found it informative, educational and entertaining, then why not give it a like and subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun to see more videos like it. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you again soon.